The Challenging the Post-Political City workshop, which Maria Kaika and I arranged here in Manchester, was an attempt to bring together scholars from across disciplines looking at different cities in the global north and the global south, and the way in which we might see a series of alternative cultures, alternative politics, and alternative ways of living in the city emerging across these contexts. We were focused upon partly engaging with processes of politicisation and depoliticisation, but also debates about the right to the city and the way in which the city might be engaged not as a brand or a neoliberal enterprise, but as a social space, somewhere to live, somewhere to be with others, and somewhere to kind of engage in different practices.
So my paper was entitled Dislocating Peripheries, Material Politics and the Dialectics of Construction. I was basically looking at a case study of a social movement named HIDOS and the urban policies done by the socialist administration in Rosario. And the aim was basically to suggest that we need to look at construction and the instance of materialization as political categories, hoping that we should somehow strengthen the path towards a material understanding of politics. So basically I looked at how that form of material politics can disrupt and dismantle established notions and categories and names that fuel contemporary urban processes in the global south particularly.
My paper was called Post-politicization and the Urbanization of the Countryside. So what I tried to do was, on one hand, suggest that we have to think the process of post-politicization beyond just the city. So the theme of the workshop was the post-political city. I was suggesting that we need to think about not the post-political, but the process of post-politicization, and not the city, but the process of urbanization. So rather than understanding the post-political as a fixed state, seeing it as something that's always in the process of construction and always in the process of being simultaneously undermined, and rather than focusing on the city as a given thing, looking at the process of urbanization as it spreads beyond the city into the countryside through the process that Lefebvre talked about in terms of the expansion of the urban fabric.
And I was presenting a paper here which was entitled Common Sense, Good Sense. And it was looking at the ways in which people have thought about the political in recent years, and showing some of the hesitations that I think I have around some of the framings of the political that have tended to develop at a certain distance from actually existing social movements. So the paper was really an attempt to think through how we might develop a conception of the political in dialogue with actually existing social movements and develop a new educational relationship.
My paper today was around a case study of OpenStreetMap as a new kind of mapping, and really questioning the extent to which it was new and to the extent that it brings a new politics into being. And my argument was that actually it's got elements of novelty, but actually an awful lot has not actually changed in this brave new Web 2.0 crowdsourced, collaborative, bottom-up alternative cartography. But actually it's still in some ways about power. It's still about representing things objectively, even though when you actually drill down into it, you can see that the map isn't fixed, that the map has been made by different people, and that it depicts a different Manchester or a different Tanzania or a different Lausanne, wherever it is. And the paper was around the tensions of the production of a new knowledge space and how this contributes to a new kind of politics or not.
I'm, in contrast to many of the other contributors of this conference, I'm actually not coming from a geography or political theory background, but I'm working within architecture, Manchester Architecture Research Centre. And I think in particular in relation to the theme of this conference, which is about the post-political and questions about the post-political in the way we deal with our cities, the way we shape our cities through architecture, planning and other disciplines. One of the arguments that I brought in my talk is by actually trying to give shape to in this post-political condition, what could be a critique from within? How can we engage with the real? How can we engage in a political way or in a democratic way from within practice and from within the real, rather than purely from the point of view of our disciplines?
So the paper I presented today had to do with the emergence of the notion of commons, which I am investigating using the example of newly squatted open spaces in downtown Athens, and the connection this has with the urban insurgencies of December 2008, and trying also to establish a connection with the practices that they take place now in the main Constitution Square in Athens.
So I was presenting a paper today which is part of a bigger research project I'm involved in at the school that looks at effective states and inclusive development. And the paper I presented took 3 examples of major civil society initiatives in the Global South, all working on reducing urban poverty, and summarised the conclusions that come out of those initiatives with respect to changing state practices. So they're more inclusive of the urban poor and they create new development opportunities, particularly in terms of secure land tenure and access to water, sanitation, drainage and other essential services.
So I think that the major challenge that came up from the workshop, and that's what I tried to engage with, is within this process of post-politicization of the urban, imagining alternative urbanities, alternatives for the urban. So what I tried to do is to engage in the so-called space politics dialectic through reading the Indignant Squares movement in Greece that happened during May and June. And this reading was informed by Jacques Rancière's analysis of politics, democracy and space. And the main point of the presentation of the paper was to insist that the contingent process, space becomes political through the contingent process of staging inequality, of staging a wrong. And those spaces are spaces of dissent and égalité, but at the same time, if those spaces are to challenge the hegemony of neoliberalization, they will involve a process of imagining and materializing alternative ways of being, saying and doing in common. And that's what I read out of the Squares movement. I mean, it was embryonic and deeply contradictory, but that was the optimistic message, if you like, of the process.